Trench warfare, a form of combat synonymous with prolonged suffering and endurance, stands as one of the most brutal chapters in military history. While it is often associated with World War I, the practice dates back centuries, with examples seen in conflicts such as the American Civil War, the Russo-Japanese War, and even earlier sieges. But what made trench warfare so uniquely horrific was its combination of unrelenting combat, appalling living conditions, and psychological torment. Today, we'll dive into the gritty reality of trench warfare, exploring how soldiers endured the unimaginable, the diseases that preyed upon them, and the lasting scars, both physical and mental, left by these grim experiences. Imagine this: you're a soldier standing in a trench, surrounded by walls of mud and sandbags. The air smells of damp earth, sweat, and decay. Just over the parapet, a no-man's land stretches out, pockmarked with craters from artillery shells and littered with the remnants of war. The enemy is mere meters away, close enough that you can sometimes hear their voices or see smoke from their fires. Death is omnipresent, and survival feels more like a matter of chance than skill. For many soldiers, the trenches became a second home, a term that belies the misery they experienced there. Basic necessities like food, water, and sleep were scarce. When food arrived, it was often stale or spoiled, barely providing the energy needed to endure the long hours of guard duty, digging, and combat. Water, when available, was frequently contaminated, leading to illnesses that decimated units as effectively as enemy bullets. And then there were the rats. These weren't the small, scurrying rodents you might see in a city. Trench rats were massive, often feeding on the corpses of fallen soldiers. They spread diseases like typhus and added another layer of torment to an already unbearable existence. How do you think you cope, knowing that even in your few moments of rest, vermin could be crawling over you? Diseases thrived in the trenches, exploiting the filthy conditions. One of the most notorious was trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to cold, wet conditions. Without proper foot care, the skin would crack, swell, and eventually rot, sometimes necessitating amputation. Imagine trying to march or fight with every step feeling like walking on shards of broken glass. Soldiers would also battle dysentery, cholera, and the flu, illnesses exacerbated by close quarters and unsanitary conditions. In the First World War alone, it's estimated that diseases killed more soldiers than bullets. If disease and the physical toll weren't enough, the psychological strain was immense. Trench warfare was characterized by its monotony, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. Soldiers lived in a perpetual state of anticipation, never knowing when the next artillery barrage or gas attack would come. Some days, the greatest threat might be boredom, while on others, it could be a surprise raid or sniper fire. This constant state of hypervigilance led to what was then called shell shock, known today as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Soldiers would experience nightmares, tremors, and flashbacks that often rendered them unable to continue fighting. Have you ever wondered how anyone could possibly endure such conditions for months or even years? One way soldiers coped was through camaraderie. The shared experience of hardship created bonds between men that were stronger than most civilian friendships. Humor, too, became a tool for survival. Soldiers often joked about their plight, using dark comedy as a way to reclaim a sliver of control over their otherwise powerless situation. Letters from home were another lifeline. For many, the simple act of writing or receiving a letter provided a vital connection to a world beyond the trenches. These letters carried news, encouragement, and a sense of normalcy that reminded soldiers of why they were enduring the horrors of war in the first place. But even this could be bittersweet. Soldiers who returned home often felt isolated from those who hadn't shared their experiences, struggling to reintegrate into a society that couldn't fully understand what they had endured. The sheer brutality of trench warfare left physical and emotional scars that many soldiers carried for the rest of their lives. Amputations and disfigurements were common, not only from bullets and shrapnel, but also from frostbite, gangrene, and other trench-related ailments. Those who escaped with their bodies intact were often haunted by their memories. The sounds of artillery, the smell of death, and the faces of fallen comrades stayed with them long after the war ended. For many veterans, the psychological wounds were just as debilitating as the physical ones. PTSD wasn't well understood at the time, and many soldiers who suffered were dismissed as weak or cowardly. Some turned to alcohol or drugs to cope, while others withdrew from their families and communities. It's heartbreaking to think about how many of these men, who had already given so much, were left to suffer in silence. The legacy of trench warfare extends beyond the soldiers who fought in the trenches. It's a grim reminder of the cost of war and the resilience of the human spirit. The strategies of trench warfare have shaped modern military tactics, while the lessons learned from the psychological and physical toll have influenced how we care for veterans today. Looking back, it's easy to question how soldiers endured such horrific conditions. But their stories of resilience, camaraderie, and survival remind us of the strength people can find in the darkest of circumstances. So, what do you think you would have done if faced with such a situation? Could you have endured months in the trenches, knowing that every day might be your last? As we reflect on this chapter of history, let's take a moment to honor the men who endured the trenches. Their suffering was immense, their sacrifices immeasurable. Yet their stories serve as a powerful testament to human endurance and the lengths to which people will go in the name of duty, survival, and hope. If you found this exploration of trench warfare compelling, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. What aspect of life in the trenches surprised you the most?